Revelation 12 contains something called the sign of a dragon. Most Christians don't realize how it's related to the rapture. On September 23, 2017, most of us saw an amazing fulfillment of a biblical sign with our own eyes. The Revelation 12 sign appeared in Virgo in the night sky, and I'm sure you remember this. There was an astronomical alignment of planets said to be a once in 7,000 year alignment that seemed to match the sign given in the Bible in Revelation 12, 1 through 2. But because of a lot of teachers who are promoting the sign as a rapture sign, it turned into the biggest prophecy scandal the last 40 years. Because obviously there was no rapture that night, nor was there supposed to be. But these signs in Revelation 12 are related to a future rapture, and we'll explain how in this video. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and in this previous video in this series, we learned that the 2017 sign was misinterpreted, that the Bible wasn't calling for the rapture that night, that the sign in Virgo meant something completely different, and it was only really one of 4 major star signs given in Revelation. A member of his community, Ryan Rego, discovered that sign from 2017 is going to repeat on Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets 2030. Yes, the very year that many think will be the year Christ returns. Not only did Ryan find a sign in Virgo for 2030, on the Feast of Trumpets no less, as we said, but also a sign of the crushing of the head of the serpent on Yom Kippur 2031. A very interesting combination of signs, which we will discuss later. After Ryan alerted me and Fisherman, one of our advisory board members, of his discovery, we think we may understand what this series of signs really means. The fact that 4 separate signs are involved is fascinating because, as we said in that previous video, one sign is interesting, but multiple signs, all on the correct days, prove prophecy. And that original sign in 2017 matched Revelation 12, 1 to 2 exactly. But why wasn't it a sign of the rapture? Most people would like to know that. The answer is that it couldn't have been. What all those prophecy teachers back in 2017 missed was that there are 3 signs in Revelation 12. The sign of the woman in labor, verses 1 and 2, then the sign of the dragon in verses 3 and 4, and only then the sign of the birth in verse 5. Notice that the second sign must appear prior to the birth of a child. And if that birth is the resurrection and rapture, as many has theorized, and we're going to show you later in this series, then a second sign must appear prior to the rapture. This is important in understanding all these signs. It's critical, in fact, but it was missed in the hubbub of 2017. Let's say it again. A second sign, the sign of a dragon, must come before the birth. So in this video, we're going to examine that second sign. Let's look at how Revelation describes it. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Revelation 12, 3 and 4. As you can see, at the time of the dragon sign, the birth has not yet taken place. The dragon's still waiting to devour the child. Put a big asterisk in your Bible to remind you of this, so that you don't get fooled again by somebody saying the Revelation 12, 1 through 2 sign is the birth. So, before that end-time birth, we need to see this sign of the dragon. It is the sign in the stars that will tell us that Jesus is returning and that the rapture is about to begin. Have we seen the sign of a dragon? I don't think so. If it's consistent with the sign of the woman, it will be a one-of-a-kind event. Let's dig into the verses in Revelation 12 that describe the dragon and see what it might mean. And then, even more interesting, when it might happen. First, we learn that the dragon sign is in heaven. It's a star sign, just like the 2017 Revelation 12 sign that most of us saw that night in September 2017. It's a star sign, but it is also a prophetic sign. It contains prophetic information. The dragon has 7 heads, which represent the empires from Revelation 17 that came against Israel in its history. It has 10 horns, which represent the 10 end-time kings, which of course promote the Antichrist to power. So it's both prophetic and a star sign. A semeion, as the Bible calls it, something meant to be observed. And as a sign in the stars in the heavens, it has to be located pretty close to the original sign in Virgo because the dragon is poised to devour the child if it can. The original sign in Revelation 12, 1 through 2 took place in the constellation of Virgo. And located in the night sky, just below Virgo, is a perfect potential candidate constellation, the constellation of serpents or the snake. This constellation is ideally located, as we said, in the night sky to appear to be ready to devour the child in the picture in the sky that's being created. However, you are probably saying, Revelation says dragon, not snake. Actually, in Revelation 12:9, it says both a dragon and a serpent. And the dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent called the devil. And the Greek word drakon, from which we get dragon, can mean a huge serpent, according to Strong's Concordance. So this isn't a problem in my mind. And serpents is a perfect representation of the dragon of Revelation 12. The constellation is divided into 2 parts by another constellation, Ophiuchus, the snake bearer, serpent's caput, representing the serpent's head, and serpent's cauda, the serpent's tail. Both of these 2 sections play a role in the prophetic passage we read. You probably noticed we read about heads and we read about a tail. The serpent also appears a reddish color in the sky. A number of its stars are red, led by its biggest star, Alpha Serpens, which is a giant red star. The constellation's head has 7 main stars. Notice 7 heads. And it's crowned with the 7 stars of another constellation, Corona Borealis, the northern crown, appropriately. These 7 crowns sit on the heads of the serpents in a 1-for-1 relationship. Again, this is exact depiction of Revelation 12, 2 through 3. Then, the second part of a constellation, the serpent's tail, has 3 main stars. In combination with 7 heads, this is 10 points of light or 10 horns. The tail is also mentioned in the prophecy as the portion that sweeps a third of the stars from the sky. We'll get back to this in a minute because it's very important. But what really caught my interest was the addition of this other constellation, the serpent bearer, Ophiuchus, who appears to hold the serpent in the night sky. Now, to Christians who realize there is a restrainer holding back the release of the beast, this symbol of the serpent bearer should be uncanny. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. 2 Thessalonians 2:7. In total, then, there is an incredibly vivid description of what John describes in Revelation 12, placed there at creation by our Creator God, as a silent symbol of the drama that one day is going to unfold. Now, this constellation is static. It never changes. It's a static portrait of the serpent. Like we said, always the same. But in order to be a sign in the heavens, it has to change. Something must be added. What made the sign of the woman in labor a sign in 2017 was the addition of a number of planets and the sun and the moon. Only when all of these moving objects were in the right place did the constellation become a sign that matched the biblical record. In the same way, the sign of a dragon must change. But it already has most of the elements in its static form. The only thing missing is the sweeping of a third of the stars from the sky to the earth. A massive group of falling stars must be added to the constellation to make it a sign. Revelation 12:4 says a third of the stars of heaven fell to earth. So this is what we anticipate happening on a future night, making this a sign. When exactly will this happen, and how will a massive number of falling stars be added to the sign? When Ryan, Fisherman, and I discussed this at first, one possibility was that the falling stars would just be a meteor shower. This was attractive because most of these meteor showers come to the Earth on a regular basis, and scientists know when this is going to happen, so it's easy to date when this would be occurring. But after we began to discuss it, we realized a meteor shower is just too unspectacular and too regular. They come at regular intervals, after all. Why didn't the 2,000 meteor showers in the past make this a sign? No, we realized that for this to be a God sign, it needed to be spectacular, a spectacular shower that was one of a kind. Another thing we realized is that very, very few moving planets move into the constellation of serpents. It's kind of on the edge of where the planets travel. So that wasn't going to be it either. However, a comet or asteroid exploding in the upper atmosphere would give us that type of effect. It would almost look like fireworks on the 4th of July. Possibly hundreds of meteors in just a couple minutes. That makes this speculative for us to predict because it hasn't happened, but something of that nature has to happen. It's interesting that 95% of all asteroids approaching the Earth as close as within the orbit of the Moon only give us a week or less warning of their approach. There were 150 of them in 2020 alone. The chance of one exploding in the atmosphere, or better yet, the chance of one being blown up by mankind to destroy it before it actually hits us, I would think is reasonably good. So what biblical event is this sign going to represent? In the previous video, we discussed how the sign in 2017, the sign of the woman in labor, happened on a Moedim, or a feast of the Lord. The feasts of trumpets, no less, and likely represented the start of labor pains, what Jesus termed the beginning of the birth pangs in Matthew 24:8. What about the dragon sweeping a third of the stars from the sky? These stars in Revelation 12 are universally thought to be symbolic of angels, and the third of the angels being cast to the earth seems symbolic of Satan and his angels being cast out of heaven. And Revelation 12 describes this exact event just a few verses after the sign of a dragon. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven, and the great dragon was thrown down, and his angels were thrown down with him. Revelation 12:7-9. Will this event be mirrored by a heavenly sign displaying a massive meteor shower? We're guessing that it might be. This isn't something you can know in advance, but it is something that we can all watch for and know that it might happen and what it might mean if you see this. Now don't forget that Jesus described the fall of Satan kind of like this in Luke 10:18, where he said, I saw Satan fall like lightning. Not that he was falling in a lightning bolt, but it was like lightning. So a big explosion, perhaps. When does this event take place? In Revelation 12:13-14, we learn that after the dragon is cast down, it pursues the woman into the wilderness, where God hides, protects, and feeds the woman for a mystic times, and half a time. This is the second half of the tribulation, so the casting down must take place somewhere around the midpoint of the 70th week of Daniel. What else could happen at the midpoint of a tribulation? The revealing of the Antichrist, when he sits in the temple of God and declares himself to be God. We read about this in 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 3. Now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus and our being gathered together to him, that's the rapture, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day cannot come until there is a great rebellion against God and the man of lawlessness is revealed. So this midpoint event has to take place prior to the rapture, prior to the birth, just as the star signs of Revelation 12 are showing. The sign of a dragon has to take place before the sign of the birth. But when exactly does it take place? Which brings us to the sign of Rosh Hashanah 2030 that Ryan Rago found. It is very similar to the sign in 2017 with one big exception. Jupiter, the planet that was the baby in the belly of the Virgin, Jupiter is not in the belly of the woman anymore. We are guessing, but this could mean that the birth has already taken place in 2030. This could be the last bookend of two similar signs, one in 2017, one in 2030. The first being the beginning of the birth pangs, and the second being the birth. So this places the beginning of the tribulation in either 2023 or 2024. We personally prefer 2024 on the Feast of Trumpets, and the midpoint in 2027 or 2028 around Passover time. So if we're right about this, and we admit we could be wrong, but if we're right, we expect a comet or an asteroid to explode in the spring of either of those 2 years. And here's what's interesting. There is such an asteroid due in the spring of 2028. It's called 2001 WN5, and it will have a magnitude equal to the moon. I mean, it'll be as bright as the moon in early February 2028. People will see it coming. And of course, there's the famous Apophis asteroid in 2029, which seems a little later than what we'd be expecting. Ryan and I have imagined that the world governments in place at that time, or world government, because it'll probably be a singular one world government at that point, might use the 2028 asteroid as target practice for the more dangerous Apophis asteroid that's coming in 2029. Now, the DART program, which bumps the asteroid, has had a successful test a couple years ago, but they may want to blast it with a nuclear missile as a test for objects that appear, within a week or less, as we talked about. Because if they appear that quickly, you don't have preparation for the DART program. The meteor shower and even the dates we're suggesting, of course, are pure speculation, but it's our best guess of what might happen for this sign to take place. It's what we can be watching for. Then, 1 year later, Ryan found that unusual sign on Yom Kippur 2031, which could be the astronomical representation of the crushing of the head of the serpent. If that's true, this sign could represent what happens when Jesus and the armies of God return to fight Armageddon and Jesus defeats the serpent Satan. These final two signs, the sign of the birth and the crushing of the head of Satan, are really, really interesting, and we can date them exactly, unlike the dragon sign. And they are at the heart of what Ryan discovered and that we have been discussing throughout this series. If you want to learn about these signs, click right here to keep watching. If that video hasn't been released yet, click over here to see the original video in this series, the one about the sign of the woman in labor. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you here or there.